Hey guys, Stan7 here, and if you looked at the title, you see the topic for this video, which I actually got from Halo Waypoint off of a poll, and I want to make sure to credit these because I generally look to Halo Waypoint polls because I think they're interesting. I look to them for my topics and videos, and I want to make sure I credit them, so I got this from Hero and Errors poll on Halo Waypoint, which says, does FFA show your skill? I found this to be a very interesting poll because it's something that more competitive players tend to debate, and I think this is a debate I've seen with competitive players for quite a while, is does FFA show your skill and how much does it show it, and does it take any skill at all, really? It's very interesting in a competitive team environment because from personal experience of being on teams, I've found that like we have sort of a 50-50 split on whether people think that it's a good indicator of skill or not, and that also happens to go with like things like 1v1s and stuff like that. I think what we've all tended to agree on is that they do take skill to win, but with game modes like 1v1 and FFA, there's also an insane amount of luck in there, and we think that there's more luck than there would be in a team game type. That's our main position, but I'm going to go through all the things that I listed out. I made a whole list on what I wanted to talk about. So my personal opinion, I just want to get it right out of the way, is I would say, does FFA show your overall skill as a player? And I'm gonna say this in a team environment for like a tournament play, for like competitive play, and I'm gonna say no. And I'll go through some of the reasons here. The first one that I said is that FFA tends to be a random game type. The best players do not win it all the time, but the best teams generally do win all the time, and that is because of its players. The best teams will consistently win series until they fall off, whereas the best FFA players do not consistently win all FFA tournaments. They kind of bounce and bounce and bounce, and it kind of goes back and forth. I definitely do think that good FFA players will consistently win at a decent rate, like maybe 25% of their matches. But at the same time, there's no FFA player that wins like 80%. That's kind of unheard of. Another one I listed was the way FFA plays out can sometimes lend itself to luck. It's generally harder to predict spawns, which is the thing that skilled players tend to do very well in a team-based mode, and I think this is something you're going to see as a theme throughout this video, is that skills in team-based modes don't translate as well to FFA, or in FFA it's a more basic version of skills. There's not as many skills shown that help in team-based modes. And one of those is predicting spawns and controlling spawns, very important in team-based modes, and I think that it's a lot more random in FFA. Another reason I listed, FFA does take a lot of positioning skill. That is something in team-based modes as well, I will give it that. But in my opinion, your positioning and how it affects your team takes more skill in team-based game types and is less luck-reliant. And what I'm saying by that is the way you have to coordinate as a team in a team-based game type and actually constantly worry about where your teammates are at and play around them takes a lot more skill than an FFA. FFA is more of positioning yourself for success, which does take skill too, I will admit, and there are times where that is important in team-based modes, but overall I think it does not lend itself very well to team-based modes. I've seen many, and I think I'm even one of them to an extent. I've seen many very good team-based players that are not the best players at FFA, but can definitely win their team's games in actual tournament game types. Another one I listed, you simply cannot read the game as well in FFA as you can in team games. What I'm getting at here is you can try to do that, but it simply does not work because of the chaoticness of all players for himself. And this is another one relating back to the theme that there's a lot more control in team game types. You don't have as much control in FFA, no matter which way you want to argue it. There's just not as much control, and that, in my opinion, would lend itself towards less skill. It can show another one. It can show skill and who consistently places well, but the winner of that particular match requires a bit of luck. Whereas in team-based types, the best teams, the teams that have the most skill, will win the most maps all the time. Whereas in FFA, that's not always true. I would say in FFA, the best player wins maybe, like, in a lobby of good players, the best player probably wins 15 to 20% of the matches, and that, if you think about it, that's not that much of the maps. It's very low amount. It's very rare to see somebody with a very high win rate that constantly plays against good players in FFA, in my experience. Another reason I listed is spawns are very important in other game types, and you cannot control your own spawns in FFA, which in my opinion means there's less of a skill gap than in team game types or controlling the map. Is something that sets the teams apart. It only takes you so far in FFA. This is similar to one of the earlier reasons I listed, and it's essentially just reiterating the fact that that control is important in FFA, but it's more important in team game types, and it's more control is more controllable, which is kind of ironic. Map control is more of something that you can control in a team-based game type, whereas you cannot control map control as well. My God, I'm saying control so much in FFA. Alright, I also wanted to list some counterpoints on why people think it could be yes. Yes, it does show team skills very well, and some points I listed for that is, one, FFA shows that you are good in one-on-one gunfights, which tends to be very important in team-based modes, even though they're more team-based. Still, one-on-one gunfights can determine games. And you know what? That's a good point. That's a valid point. I'll admit that. FFAs do tend to show which players are better in one-on-one gunfights. They're not the best indicator of it because there's still a lot of shooting in the back and stuff like that in FFAs. Is there less of it in FFA than team game types, or is there more? I think that's more of a debatable topic. I'd say it's pretty close to the same, to be honest. But overall, I would say you'd be able to control that stuff more in team game types, in my opinion. But I cannot debate with the fact that FFA does show who is better in one-on-one gunfights, better than any other mode. I would definitely agree with that. If you win a lot of FFAs, you probably have skills that many talented arena players have: good gun skill, good game knowledge, good positioning, and that is another counterpoint that I think is very true. The better FFA players would tend to be good arena players. I don't think there's good FFA players that are bad arena players, although I do think that there's many arena players that are awesome that are pretty average at FFA. Although I don't think that FFA is a very good indicator. It's a good indicator if you have good skills for team game types, but I don't think who's the best at FFA is a good indicator for who's going to be the best on certain teams and best individually skilled. Number 3, this is sort of a different, kind of random thought I put, but I said that an opportunist should theoretically be the best player in an FFA environment, or support players, and what I was saying is that FFA kind of lends itself towards support player and opportunistic types of players. You would think that because FFA kind of is, in an every man for himself, it lends itself very well to players that can take advantage of opportunities they see on the map, and those types of players are very important on competitive teams. Another one, it's every man for himself and you constantly come out on top. Logically, this means you have to be good, which is essentially saying FFA is a mode. It's completely singular, and if you're a person that's constantly on the top or in the top 3, this should indicate that, logically, that you have to be good and at a higher skill level than the other players. Another solid point that should translate to team game types. Another one, final one here. Things like power weapon control are just as, if not more important in FFA than in team types, and often, if not always, determine the winner. This is another thing. Power weapon and power-up control in Halo 5 is important in FFA. I'm not a fan of that, but I will admit that it is. My personal opinion, I don't think power-ups and power weapons should be in FFA. I'm just going to get that out of the way. I think it's bull. But moving on, that's another topic, another day. Now I'm inspired to make that video. Anyways, what I was getting at. Power weapon and power-up control can win games in team game types, and they can win games in FFA even more so, and I think that if you're good at controlling that stuff in FFA, you should be good at controlling it in team game types. You should have the same around-the-clock stuff, especially since you don't have a coach. In FFA, you need to time it. I think that's a very good... That's probably the best team skill that comes from FFA. So overall, summarizing what I said in the video, I think FFA definitely requires skill to be good at. I don't think that's debatable, and it does tend to show very good individual skill. While it shows individual skill at a very basic level, it does not showcase the most important skills that win teams tournaments. I think there are more important skills that make good players good and separate the really great players from the good players. And I think those skills are not shown in FFA. I think those skills need to be shown in game types, or in team game types. Skills like controlling maps, knowing when to rotate, knowing what to do in certain positions, knowing when to play with your team, knowing when to separate, knowing when to play one-on-one, knowing when to look for teammates. Just a whole plethora of skills that I think aren't shown as well in FFA that are shown better in team game types and that can win you team tournaments. And finally, the winner of a specific FFA match is generally a mixture of skill and luck. Rarely do players dominate FFA always. You will find players that tend to win the most, like maybe 15 to 20% match rate, but I would say that FFA has a pretty good mixture of skill and luck because of the fact that it's very hard for an extremely talented individual player to consistently win it at a rate that would be like 70 to 80% of the time. You think they would be able to do that. But I mean, there is a lot of factors that go in there. Team game types take some of those random factors and narrow them down, and that's why I think that team game types take more skill than something, even individual skill, than something like FFA. And those are my final thoughts, guys. I could talk about that topic for so long, and there's so many aspects of it I didn't even get to go into. Let me know what you think in the comments. I honestly really want to do in this video, because this is a topic I've had with some of my competitive teammates before, and we've discussed it pretty extensively, and I think it's an interesting topic. I want to hear what you guys think about it. Let me know what you thought about the gameplay or the discussion, and see you next time.